in love, I think, or smitten is the way that you'll see it described when you see the written accounts.
I bet a lot of guys were smitten with her.
Yeah. And they had the pair had met sometime in 2003.
He was pretty quiet. Sorry, right?
Oh,
he
yeah,
was quiet.
he was.
She
He
was
was kind of
outgoing one.
Yeah, it's that relationship. You see that a lot. There's the quiet one and the very outgoing. He was the quiet one in the relationship.
Okay.
They met, though, like I said, in 2003, and then they moved in together the following year. And I'm not really sure exactly what this means, but it's said that they like to have a few drinks. They were described as 30-something barflies.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they went out and had a beer, a couple of drinks.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, that's my thing, is I don't know what that means specifically, because I know a lot of people who, in their early to mid-30s, will go have a couple of drinks at the end of the day, a couple times a week.
So I think that's one of those generational things, and also a Portland thing. Like in Portland, we go out, we drink, we eat. That's what we do. That's societally, that's what we do here. A lot of places. We don't have kitchens. There's not enough room in our houses for kitchens. We can't afford them.
We put birds on everything and we can't cook.
There's just pickles everywhere. But, I mean, when I lived in the Midwest, for instance, people in their early 30s were expected to be married with kids and young kids. So it was less of the going out culture in your early to mid 30s and more of the family life culture. So I can see how that would be brought up sometimes as meant to be an outlier, whether we think it's an outlier or not. I mean, I don't know that that's relevant.
No, that's a perspective I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with boozing up.
Yeah,
Booze
I
is
agree.
good.
Yeah.
Also, nothing wrong with being family at that age.
Absolutely not. Back to the story, though. But by all outward accounts, the pair were in a relatively happy relationship, and we will talk about some further details. As with every relationship, there's always things that aren't quite right.
Well, duh.
That's called being human.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going to solve this now. He murdered her.
But we'll talk about that later on. Lana's father is retired from the U.S. Coast Guard. And I say that because it's always brought up about the fact that he was very diligent in teaching her boater safety, and because they spent so much time on the water, she really liked being on the water.
And she was competent.
And she was a competent behind the wheel of a boat, or behind the controls.
Obviously, she'd probably been doing it since she was a kid.
Exactly.
So that's helpful.
And she's, her family has always said that she was very serious when she was on the water. It was safety first. If you were going to have drinks, you did that when you got back to the dock. Like, she wasn't, flippant isn't the word. She wasn't reckless about it or careless about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. This is important to know because 4 years before she disappeared, which would be in 2001, Lana had bought a 27-foot well-crafted cabin cruiser, which she had named Sea's Life.
Not Sea's Life. She named it Boaty McBoatface. Which, if I ever get a boat, I'm going to name it that.
If only.
No, she was many, many, many years before that meme came around.
I know.
So just a quick description of her boat, because it's where the majority of our mystery takes place.
Well, it was boat-shaped. We know that.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Really, when you get down to it, isn't almost everything boat-shaped?
Well,
You could float on a piece of plywood.
But it's not boat-shaped.
yeah.
This argument's going nowhere. Let's get back to the story.
Well, it was a 27-foot cabin cruiser, right?
Right.
But not a lot of people know what that is.
But not everybody knows what that is, Joe.
Oh.
Here's a description of it. Is the boat? It is one of those boats where the rear half to 2/3 is an open space.
It's called the well.
Yes, the well. It has seats and benches for people to hang out. There is the pilot seat where the controls are, the steering and the throttle.
Almost every picture you see online of like rich, attractive people hanging out on a boat is a boat like this.
Right. Pretty close.
It's
yeah.
like the girls in bikinis sitting on the bench off the back of a boat. That's this boat.
But this is, keep in mind, this boat is a single story, because you'll see boats that have the raised or enclosed cabins.
Yeah, those are like yachts.
Right.
This is like the boat version.
Is an open cabin boat.
Yeah.
Everything is open. There is a small stairwell in the front that goes into the bow, which has a small living quarters.
Yeah, it's called the Cuddy Cabin.
There's teeny. There's a small toilet. There's a place a fridge and a stove. And depending on the model, or maybe there's something that can be changed out, it would have bench seats and a table or a bed.
I would think it was like an RV. You know how you can fold
that's
the
why
table
I
down
say it may be
Yeah,
changeable.
The table. Usually boats like this have a V berth and right up in the bow, and then the dining table, drops, and it's got cushions you can put on it.
Right.
And then that's another bunk.
Right.
That's usually how they have.
And that's what the pictures of this
And a
boat
tiny head.
look like, is that it's itsy bitsy. Yeah, it's not something that you live in. It's
No.
you take a trip. Oh, I got to take a wee. I go down
Or
and
you
I
have
take a
someplace
wee.
to sleep if you're doing one overnighter.
Right, exactly. Oh, and the other thing that I will say is that because it looks cool, I always like it, this boat has a big spoiler on it off of the back end. That it's actually meant to also house, they have the plastic and tarpaulin covers for cruddy weather.
Yeah.
You could cover it up. It's got a small swim deck off the back, which is just a platform. There is a swim ladder. It's important to note that the ladder on this particular boat sits on the top of the deck that you would dive off of. It's not one of the ones that's mounted underneath or built into the actual boat, into the hull.
Well, you fold it down when you want to use it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not something that would be readily accessible from the water.
No.
Some boats have them where they're on the underside and you can just reach over and pull it, and that's not what this boat had at all.
Yeah. Some of my neighbors growing up had a boat very similar to this that we took out onto the river.
The only other thing I'll say about her boat is, though we know it's a 27-foot Wellcraft cabin cruiser, we don't know the exact model, which makes it a little tough. I mean, when I say the exact model, okay, well, maybe it's 2700, but it could be the 2701 or something. I tried to get really deep into the specifics to figure out details about this boat. I'm working off a lot of generalities. I kind of had to assemble it from similar boats and ones that are of the year, because we don't even know what year her boat was.
Right.
So it makes it a little awkward.
She probably about a used one.
Probably.
You didn't call her family?
I did not.
Why
Not
the
this
hell
time,
not?
because I didn't.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk about the trip that the pair had planned. Lana and Chuck were planning to take a trip from her parents' house, which is in Belle River, Canada, and they were going to head north to Mackinac Island, which is in northern Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Their route was going to take them from the southern edge of Lake St. Clair, which is a small lake connected to Lake Huron, and up the St. Clair River into Lake Huron, and then they were going to head north up to the point where Lake Huron meets up with Lake Michigan. So it's about a 300-mile or so trip.
A nice little trip.
Yeah, and it's going to take them about 2 days.
Except Lake Huron is known as the Lake of Death.
It is not known as that, Joe.
Oh, it's not? I'm thinking of somewhere else. Okay.
I do want to point out, though, this is one of those times where I felt like a geography moron because of the fact that, wait, their trip started in Canada and then they headed north to Michigan?
Yup.
What?
Yeah, I know.
It's because I'm
part
from the
of
West
Canada.
Coast,
I
and I
know.
always look at the map, and it's always the map of the U.S. with Canada deleted, and so you just look at it, it's like, oh, well, it's kind of a straight line.
Yeah,
But
no,
Canada dips down up there. I know that now, but I felt really dumb. So anybody else who's confused, that's what's going on.
No, I actually think that Canada should give that land back. Like, what the hell are they doing down there? I mean, they
Living
got
on it?
land further south in the U.S. That ain't right.
Oh, well, sorry to all of our Canadian listeners as
Just
you've
kidding.
unsubscribed to the podcast.
You can keep it.
So on the 10th of August, 2005, Lana and Chuck launched from Belle River, and they head north. They made it to Oscoda, which is about 150 miles north, or 240 kilometers, roughly, north from their launch point at the end of the first day. And they stopped and docked there that night. While they were there, they met a guy named Richard Bannon, and he offered to give them a ride into town. And then he and his wife joined them for dinner and a couple of cocktails. And then he took them back to the dock that night.
So he did it.
Yeah, that's
No.
what I'm thinking.
Oh.
because they then the next morning got up and left.
Says
And-
who?
Yeah, how do you know he wasn't hiding on the boat somewhere?
I'm sorry.
Wow,
We'll calm
you
down.
two are really wound up today.
I'm pretty hyped about this mystery.
I can't. They left on the morning of Thursday the 11th, and they headed north, and they stopped in Presque Isle at about 12:30 in the afternoon. So while they're there and they're getting fueled up, a guy by the name of Gene Austin was working on the dock, and he had said he met the couple. They were in good spirits. The weather was turning kind of crappy. It was cold and windy, so they were wearing fleeces to keep warm, but they were in good spirits. Lana asked him if there was any areas that she needed to avoid, and he told her about 2 different shallows to watch out for. She then told him, "Oh, well, I've got those in my GPS, so no big deal." And they left after they had topped off the tank. And by all accounts, everything was fine.
Well, were they shadowed by a mysterious figure in a black raincoat and a fedora?
No, they were not.
Oh,
Dang.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, and so the storms worth mentioning?
It is. So when they left initially, the weather was good, and they thought they were going to have good weather the whole time. On that second day, the weather was turning cold. I don't know that it was actually raining, but it was windy. The seas did start to get rough,
Okay.
the water in the lake. I believe the next day, there are reports of swells anywhere from 3 to 5 feet.
Okay, so I
But that's
just
the next day
wonder.
as the storm is continuing to roll in. It was
Right.
just crappy and cold.
They really
But-
should have taken a car.
They shoulda.
Yeah.
But Gene Austin, the guy that
Mm-hmm.
was talking to them on the docks, he didn't really mention. And I thought they shouldn't be going out in that weather. or anything.
Nothing like that.
So
It-
it seemed like it was fine. It was like not ideal, but
Yeah,
it was still fine.
it was cold.
Okay.
It was chilly out, but
And
it
a little
wasn't
windy,
as
but it
if they
wasn't.
were going into hurricane force
Okay.
winds or anything crazy
Great.
like that.
Yeah, and 3 to 5 foot swells is not a big deal, even a 27-foot boat.
Yeah,
you
but
know.
it wasn't even at that level on that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's-
Yeah, it wasn't
I
till
mean,
the
that's
next-
when the
wasn't
storm
till the
had
next
progressed.
morning, really.
Okay.
But,
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
I was understanding correctly.
Absolutely. At somewhere around 1:30 in that afternoon, Lana called her aunt, the one who lived on Mackinac Isle, or Island. Sorry, it's not Isle. And she was going to let her know, hey, we're a couple of hours out.
So we'll be there soon.
Yeah, we'll be there in a couple of hours, no big deal. She then, at 1:45, called another aunt who lived in Florida, chatted with her, and also told her that they were about 2 hours away from their destination.
Now that's suspicious.
And
So it
then
should have been 1 hour and 45 minutes.
at about 2 o'clock, Lana made one more phone call where she called a male friend of hers. He didn't answer the phone, but she left a 1-minute voicemail for him. Yeah.
I mean, was she good friends with the aunt in Florida?
Evidently, she was pretty close with her.
It just,
Somebody that she talked to on a regular basis.
I guess it's just kind of one of those things for me where I just think, really? You know, she's on a boat. The weather's not great. She's calling all these people.
She could be in the cabin, though. She could be
But then
chilling in the
who's
cabin.
Is Chuck driving the ship or the
Chuck
boat?
very well could have been. I mean,
He-
it's not that hard to drive a boat.
It's not that hard to drive a boat, and Chuck had learned to drive the boat. So
Okay.
they've been living together for a year. They've been dating for at least 2 at that point, and she was always on the boat, so he had
Okay.
to have learned how to drive the boat in, if nothing else, at least open water.
So then you're saying, yeah, okay, Chuck, you stay up here and, hate this by yourself. I'm going to go down to the cabin and make a couple phone calls.
I'm going to
Yeah.
call some other guy, man.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
no, I'm sure they took turns steering the boat.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they totally did. I've done that before when I'm on long trips. Here, you take the wheel. I'm done with this for a while.
You take a lot of boat trips?
Occasionally,
Yeah.
I have 3-hour tours. Okay, so we're going to move forward to Friday the 12th. A captain of a ship crossing Lake Huron saw a small boat bobbing, as he says it, up and down in the rough seas.
That's when the swells were happening?
Yeah, that's when the swells were 3 to 5 foot. He said that he figured either the pilot of that boat was crazy or they were in trouble. So he called the Coast Guard to let him know that he had found this boat, because he approached the boat and nobody was responding. He calls the Coast Guard. They had already been alerted to the fact that Chuck and Lana hadn't arrived the day before by Lana's dad. he had called the Coast Guard saying, hey, they didn't arrive.
They didn't
It's
check
been
in.
hours. Something's wrong. So the Coast Guard go, they approach the boat. Nobody's on it. The boat itself was just drifting. It was 11 miles northeast of Mackinac Island.
So
it was
pretty close.
close-ish. Yeah. It. When
I
you
mean,
look at it on
relative
the
to
map,
when they called.
no, actually, it's farther away. I mean, it's obvious that the boat had continued to travel, whether on its own power or by the currents. It's hard to say, but yeah, I mean, it obviously had gone. To me, when I tracked it on the map, it looks like from the 2 o'clock phone call onward, the boat must have continued moving under power for some amount of time. It couldn't have just stopped.
Right. It couldn't
Right.
have just floated that way.
Right.
But considering where it was found, it wasn't moving in quite the right direction.
It wasn't, but that's part of that's the currents.
Right.
But the Coast Guard go on the boat. Again, nobody answers their hail. They go on the boat. They find nobody on it, and they don't really find any signs of foul play. There's not blood sprayed everywhere
Sure.
or everything broken or anything crazy like that.
No axe marks or anything?
No axe marks
No? Okay.
in the frame of the boat. There's a number of strange things about the boat itself or the condition that we should talk about.
Okay.
Devin's going to be very excited because I've used bullet points here. The first thing we're going to talk about is that the boat's engine was on. It was running, though the boat was in neutral. So it had been idling for a fair amount of time.
Yeah.
They had to fuel up after one day, right? They used an
day
entire
and a
tank
half.
of fuel in a day and a half.
Day and a half, and that's at speed.
Okay.
I mean, boats can, it's like your car.
Right.
Your car can idle for a long time.
Right. I mean, I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering is, were they able to guess, idling for this many hours, it would have used this much gas, so we think it probably...
I know that's a good question, because gas usage. Obviously, they were going under power somewhere for a
Right.
while. And then, although you never know, it might be kind of useless to try to estimate that because somebody else could have taken the boat, used it
Right.
for some other
But
purpose,
you would-
and
It's true.
yeah.
And I haven't seen
Okay.
anything that tried to plot how
Right.
much fuel usage there was, because I don't know that anybody ever said, and there was X amount of fuel left in the tank. I've never seen that either, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
I guess I have to just assume that the Coast Guard probably knows what they're talking about, and if they thought it was worthwhile, they would have done it.
I hope they do.
Probably, yeah.
And of course, another good question to ask is, if you search the boat, do you find like a spare 5-gallon gas can somewhere, and is it full or empty?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and again, that's something I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And another question I'd like to hear answered is, did they have any kind of dinghy or lifeboat on this thing, and was it present?
If they had any kind of lifeboat, it would have had to have been an inflatable.
Uh-huh.
This boat is way too small to have anything but an inflatable.
Per the last time we talked about, it was the one we had our intern on.
Right, the emergency.
Because I actually looked up and requirement, and it sounds like Lana was, pretty responsible boat owner, and so she would have been required to have an inflatable life raft
As a 27-footer?
as anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do know that the boat had a lot of PFDs, life jackets. So besides a lot of those boats, the seat cushions are technically flotation devices, but it also had 4 life vests on board.
They were actual life vests, not the
You're right. As far as I understand, they were, because they're always referred to as PFDs, which is a personal flotation device, which to me does not infer that it was a seat cushion, but it was actually something you could put on.
Well, actually, the PFD is anything. That's why a life jacket is a little bit distinct, just like a propeller is a little bit distinct from a screw. A screw is a propeller is not necessarily a screw.
like a.
I really
And-
hate it when he pulls out his nautical
I know,
knowledge.
sorry,
Makes me
man,
look like a ding dong.
Yeah.
Well, but they
I-
also make, and I suspect they did not have this on the ship, but they do also make bodysuits that are personal flotation devices that are mainly for crews of ships that are going across the Atlantic because they're insulated, they keep you alive, they
For a
have a
long
little bit of
time, yeah.
resources, they have lights and stuff like that, but they are also PF.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I don't.
typically PFDs are life
Yes.
jackets.
And I think,
typically.
looking at the images that I've seen of this particular boat, I don't think that the seats were flotation devices. I think they were actual life jackets.
I think it was probably life
and
jackets.
she had 4
maybe
life
an
jackets on the
inflatable.
boat, and apparently she always had 4 on there. That's what she kept
that
on.
would make sense.
Yeah.
Those 4 life jackets were not there.
Okay.
When they found the boat, those were gone.
Okay.
The running lights of the boat were not turned on,
Okay.
so they were off. But the stereo was apparently on. It's said that the stereo was on and it was turned to a Christian station, which wasn't something that the pair were known to listen to.
So obviously, we're talking Christian pirates here.
But
Well-
I can't substantiate that anywhere. It's just you see it. It's one of those things that you see danced around.
Well, even on top of that, I mean, if I have my radio tuned to one channel, I drive 2 hours outside of Portland, and suddenly it's a totally different thing.
Exactly.
You know, so if they were, 4 or 5 hours away,
Yeah.
they had one radio station on, it could be something totally different by the time they hit
I
there.
will agree with that entirely.
Also, some stations will just occasionally play something that's kind of Christian. So at the moment that you happen to board the boat, that one song is playing something by Amy What's-Her-Face. I can't remember her name now.
I don't know.
Anyway,
That's true.
So
Possible.
maybe it wasn't even a Christian. But I still like the idea of Christian pirates.
We're not in theories yet, Joe.
Yeah, we're not
okay.
there
We'll
yet.
talk
Bob.
about it later.
You're ahead of the game. The GPS unit on the boat, and there's a lot of contention over this, and we're going to talk about this more in theories. But the GPS unit is said to have turned on around 1:30 a.m. on the 12th. We're gonna talk about in more depth on how that's looked at.
But can we talk about how they know that?
Okay, so GPS units, this particular GPS unit has a certain number of track points. You set your GPS unit to log a data point every something, whether it be a
Got
distance
it.
or a time.
Okay.
And it stops tracking data points, and sometime on the 11th, and then suddenly at 1:30 a.m. on the 12th,
It starts tracking
starts
again.
tracking data points again.
Okay.
And did they? This was a Garmin GPS, right?
I can't verify that. I believe that it was a Garmin, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay,
it
we'll
did-
talk more about that.
Okay.
Yeah. But the
And
other thing...
this was a 2005 GPS, so it was about the size of a television set.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a 2004 boat, or 2001 boat, so I don't know what size it was. It could have been the half of the boat for all we know.
It was actually the entire deck of the boat.
Yeah, because the older GPSs were that big.
They were.
Yeah, they
I
were
remember.
huge. And they didn't actually have a screen. They just had this printer that spat out coordinates. Yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
And actually, and the cabin was actually halfway taken up with air conditioning units. It had to cool the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah.
Yep, this is totally accurate. We're not making any of this up.
Okay, so what else did they find on the boat?
Okay, so more about the GPS unit, though. One of the mounting knobs for the GPS unit was found jammed in the bottom of Lana's sneaker.
Are we talking just like little knob like
We're
this?
talking a knob that I would say is the handle of the knob would be like 2 inches or so around.
That big? I think it'd be more like about this size. That seems kind of excessive.
That's huge.
That's kind of huge, yeah.
And then it has a screw coming out.
And then it has a screw
and
coming
the screw
out.
is what was stuck.
Yeah, and the screw head, it's a flat machine screw.
Mm-hmm.
It's what is jammed into the bottom of her sneaker.
So she had a fight with her GPS.
And the back of her sneaker, which was, the whole sneaker obviously is on the deck, but the back of the sneaker was also torn.
I just have to point out, no signs of foul play. Sneaker with thing embedded in it, back torn. No signs of foul play.
I know that
Totally normal.
it is a little strange. Don't you think?
While I admit that it's strange, I don't know that it's actually a sign of foul play.
I don't either, but I just like the statement. The idea that a torn sneaker is definitely not a sign of foul play.
She might have torn the sneaker weeks ago. You never know. They're her favorite sneakers. Gonna wear them out.
I have to apologize to our listeners for having just said like the like. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
Let's keep
I
going.
like that.
Well, let's talk about the rope that was on the back of the boat. Because there was a 20-foot rope drifting behind the boat, tied to the boat.
What is that, like 6 meters?
About 6 meters, yeah. It was trailing behind the boat when the captain of the ship that spotted C's life approached the boat. He said he saw 2 blue rubber bumpers tied to that rope. And rubber bumpers, if you're not familiar with it, they're kind of round, rubbery cylinder guys that you would stick between the boat and a dock.
Yeah, they're
so that you don't.
cylindrical.
Yeah.
They're cylindrical, round on the ends, and you've got these 2 tongues that stick out. And
That you
hold
tie a
them
rope
for
to.
tying ropes to. Yeah.
And when the Coast Guard showed up, there was no bumpers. There was no blue bumpers tied to that rope.
And I'm sorry, did we say what time that ship found the boat? About?
He
found
saw it
that
sometime in the
morning.
morning, and the Coast Guard got to it sometime that morning. It's never specified exactly
But
what
we
time.
don't even know pre-dawn, dawn.
I would say before noon.
Okay,
I
but it was
believe that
daylight?
Yes.
Okay.
It was daylight because they found the boat. And I think that's one of the reasons that the running lights not being on is noted, because it had obviously been out there all night long. So if somebody had been on it at night, you would believe they would normally turn on the running lights.
Right.
But that wasn't the case.
Okay.
I think as we talked about a little bit before, there's a swim ladder on this boat. The swim ladder was up, so it wasn't dropped into the water. In the trash can, there was an empty bottle of vodka. It was a fifth of vodka.
They'd been out there for how many days?
This was their second day.
Okay, whatever.
Seems reasonable.
Yep, and look at this. All of their personal effects and their money is accounted for. No personal
Apparently.
belongings
Yeah.
appear to be missing.
Well, now here's the deal. Now they say they found their wallets and all that stuff, like on the boat. They say they found their clothes on the boat. Were their clothes below decks, or were they up in the cockpit or the well of the boat?
The images that I saw, it gives me the impression that there was some stuff strewn around, but
Below decks or above
this
decks?
is above deck.
Okay.
But it was like, a pair of shorts and a towel or something. And I'm working from memory here. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I've never really seen photos of below decks. I mean, I had to go looking for similar boats to get an idea of what it looked in the bow. So I don't know. I don't know what was where.
Yeah, no, I've seen accounts that say their clothes were found on board. I wondered, is it like,
In disarray or in their
well,
bag.
or did it appear that they'd stripped naked before jumping into the water and dropped their clothes right there in the well, or were there just clothes stashed below decks? I mean, I don't, that's what
I can't say. I haven't seen anything that says it specifically. And like I said, I've only seen a few photos of the well of the boat when it was found. I haven't seen anything in the actual cabin area.
Okay.
So obviously, of course, they find this boat. The people that are supposed to be on the boat are not on the boat. So a huge search goes on. The Coast Guard's got ships running around. They've got helicopters. The Canadian Coast Guard is doing the same thing. Her family, Lana's family, comes to the area. When they get her boat back from the Coast Guard, they're using it to go around and try and find her. Thousands of square miles is this area that they're covering. Keep in mind, the lake itself is like 23,000 square miles. It's a huge friggin' lake.
I got an
Good
idea. Let's use a potential crime scene as a means to search for people. Let's just
It
do
was
that.
released.
Yeah,
They could pick it up, and they did.
Yeah, I don't know how long they had it in custody, though. It must have been for a while, right? They didn't just turn around and turn it over to the
I
family,
honestly
did they?
don't know how long it was in custody.
I mean,
all
I
I know is that the family talks about the fact that they took her boat out
Yeah.
and they used her boat, and there's some issues that are brought up later on that they're like, we totally kept using this boat and nobody suffered any ill effects.
Well, I like it better if the family goes out in the boat and they disappear, and then and then more family comes out and they disappear.
Yeah.
And I like
And
that
it's the
better.
boat. The boat's doing it.
I like that better. Can we just put that in there?
No, is it? It's the carry of boats.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it basically just like flips over, chucks them out, and then rights itself.
Motors itself back to the dock, ties itself up in that nice, crappy 1970s or 1980s still photography where a rope wraps itself around something as it ties itself.
Yeah.
We'll totally set this up, guys. So we're going to move forward in time to the 24th of August, which is 2 weeks later. Two women spot what they believe is a body on the rock shoal of Huron Bay. And the authorities come out and take the body away and indeed confirm that it is Lana. The strange thing about the condition of her body is that she is completely naked, short of wearing her watch, a ring, and her necklace. I say
What's
that's
strange about that?
Well, I say that's strange because her family knew that she never swam with her jewelry on, which I totally get.
Yeah,
well,
why would
yeah.
you?
I mean, why would you? Yeah.
She always used to put it on her watch band and then attach her watch band to the wheel of the boat.
Right, which is really smart.
Yes. The other reason is that the watch itself was a watch that somebody had given her years ago when it was kind of a prized possession. She'd recently had it cleaned and tuned.
Yeah, it was an
so to
expensive
just
watch.
jump into the water with it and blatantly, knowingly destroy it was unlike her.
Well, duh.
The other thing that casually hop in for a swim with it on.
Sure.
Well, especially with the weather conditions, what they are, and the water temperature, what it was. And
Yeah, it's very apparent that she was naked when she was in the water. It's not as if she went in and her clothes came off of her, and that's because there were no rub marks or wear marks from the clothing, and she didn't even have any, no underwear, no nothing. So it would be apparent, and there wasn't enough time for those things to have broken up enough or gotten waterlogged enough to come off on their own.
yeah, the only thing I could think of is that if she went in and then took her clothes off, because obviously swimming with clothes, wet clothes, is very,
It's
very
very
hard.
hard.
Well, we're not in theories yet, but I will
Right.
rebuke that with
Yeah.
who the hell bothers to take off their underwear when they're taking off their heavy jeans and shirt. You don't worry about your underwear. Those are kind of inconsequential, I would believe.
Counterpoint, she wasn't wearing any.
That's what I was
possible,
thinking too.
but on a cold, blustery day, I don't know that that's the case. But we're not in theories yet, so we're going to sideline that for a few minutes.
Ah, right, fine.
So a little bit more about the body. It appears that there were no marks or bruises of obvious trauma that would have caused her to die.
Sorry, I had one question.
Yeah.
So do we know what time did the watch stop at?
It's not said.
Okay.
We don't know. It's a great question. I've
That
never
is,
seen what the timestamp was.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent point, and it's kind of like an indictment of American journalism that these friggin' reporters who have massively more resources
Well,
than
but
we
the watch could
don't find it
potentially be water resistant, so then they'd have to do the math. And reporters don't like math. It's kind of kryptonite.
I just feel like you can say the watch stopped at this time,
Yeah,
and it still gives you at least a frame
completely
of
understand.
reference.
And you know what? The police may not have ever released that information.
Possible, yeah.
That's completely plausible, too. But the body, like I said, there's no marks, there's no outward sign of obvious trauma. The medical examiner does rule that she did drown. That was the cause of death. The only other thing that they call out is that there was almost no alcohol in her system at all, which means that probably from the drinks a few drinks she'd had the night before, but it wasn't as if she had been boozing it up on the 11th.
Right directly prior to her death. Right.
But she also had elevated levels of carbon monoxide in her system, which we'll talk about.
Okay.
So I guess really where we're at now is there's a couple of things. So Chuck's body has never been found.
Well, Chuck has never been found.
Right.
Let's just be clear.
Yes, Chuck has never been found.
You don't know if he's dead or
So
alive.
the mystery is what happened on C's life that day. What happened to cause Lana to go into the water and die? Did Chuck die that day? And if so, how? And if not, where is he? I mean, those are our mysteries here. So let's go into theories.
Let's solve this mystery. I'm tired of it already.
So theory number one is that it was an accident due to skinny dipping.
No.
Okay, this is actually one that you'll see bandied about on the internet
That's
a
silly.
lot.
It's silly.
Well, no, I totally understand. Initially, without doing any reading on the conditions and all of that, people are like, well, they probably decided that it would be a good idea to just jump off the boat and go skinny dipping.
Can I just real quick run through why this is a bad idea?
Please.
I know it's railroading you a little bit, but okay, in the middle of a storm, it's cold, it's the middle of the night.
I don't know that it was
She didn't have any
Well, it
alcohol.
wouldn't have been the middle of the night, but it was the daytime.
Whatever. Didn't have any alcohol in her system, so she was making good decisions. Also the watch, also the necklace, also the ring. No.
Yeah.
The only things that I'll add to that is that the air temperature was in the mid to low 60s and the water was 62 degrees.
Okay, although on the other hand,
Which is not something that would incline me as a man to jump into the
Well,
water.
guys
I'll be-
especially do not like to climb into cold water naked and come back out again. Because,
I will
you know,
be 100% honest with you guys. I have at one point, sorry if this is oversharing, very drunkenly gone skinny dipping on the Oregon coast in the middle of winter.
Whoa. Yeah.
So it's colder, the water's
yeah.
colder, but I was so drunk, I didn't even feel it.
Right, but you have to be.
You have to be super drunk to think that's
and
a good idea.
Lana had almost no booze in her, so that
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah, and
Now,
the watch.
Yeah, people really easily. I understand why this is an easy go-to thing,
But it's bad.
But yeah, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, people also say, well, they must have been doing that, and that's why there was a line off the boats, because that's how they were making sure the boat didn't get away from them. But I've jumped off a boat. I got convinced once to jump off of an unmoored boat, and that thing in almost no winds and on a flat lake started to move on its own really quickly.
Also, you don't put your boat in idle, you turn it off.
Yeah.
And also, you probably drop an anchor.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
So there's a whole bunch of holes with this. They just went skinny dipping,
Also,
and
the
the boat went away.
swimming, you need the ladder down.
You would want the ladder.
We don't
down.
need the ladder to get off of the boat.
But you
need
need
to
it
get
back on.
You want to do
That's
that,
an
yeah.
important part of the skinny dipping theory.
But this is actually I've suddenly had a flash of realization that we just solved the Mary Celeste. Skinny dipping, yes.
Okay.
Duh!
No, obviously.
Well, now that we've changed stories, let's go to our next theory.
On the Mary Celeste? Okay.